Doc. Short of being dead, what the hell are you doing this for anyway?
Wad Up is my friend.
Yeah, well, I got lots of friends.
I don't.
Check. All right, partygoers, welcome back to Zero Dark Nerdy, the galaxy's most average pop culture podcast. This is your boy Brian, a.k.a. El Nino, and I'm sure you've already heard the news, but our beloved Val Kilmer has unfortunately passed away on April 1st. So this one definitely hits very, very close to home. I grew up on Val Kilmer with movies like Top Secret, Real Genius, of course, Top Gun, Tombstone, Heat, and this is definitely a tough one. I'm doing this episode by myself, so my nerves are already up through the roof. Believe it or not, after 7 years of podcasting, I still get nervous before every single podcast. Probably has to do with my anxiety as well as depression and everything else, but that's neither here nor there. We're here to talk about the great Val Kilmer. He's got 103 acting credits to his name, and just such a dedicated artist and human being. I had the pleasure of watching the Val documentary. It's literally called Val on Amazon Prime, probably about 2 years ago when it came out, and just rewatched it again the other night. Whether if you're a fan or not, I highly recommend this documentary. He was very big on videotaping everything that was going on in his life. Kind of reminds me of my dad when he had the old school over-the-shoulder camcorder, and that's what Val did. Pretty much growing up, making movies on his own with his family, things like that. He actually did a lot of auditions with these cameras for movies he wasn't even attached to yet because he wanted to work with specific directors and whatnot. Like, he made audition tapes in mini movies, like legit mini movies for Stanley Kubrick for Full Metal Jacket. And he did the same thing for Scorsese, trying to land the Henry Hill role on Goodfellas. So just, an incredible loss for such a great talent. You may or may not have known, he was battling throat cancer, lost his voice. When you're watching the documentary, he's got to do the thing in the middle of the throat to talk. So his son is actually the narrator of the documentary about him and his life and what he went through. So, again, this is someone that I grew up with, and, films in the 80s as well as 90s, pre-internet, were just fantastic. And you would want to be these characters. Top Gun, especially, if you talk to anyone that saw it, whether in theaters or even just rented it as a kid or even as a teenager, people wanted to grow up and be a fighter pilot. When Rocky came out, everybody wanted to box. When the Karate Kid came out, everybody wanted to do karate. So, again, this is pre-influencers, pre-internet, things like that, where you would look at these characters and be like, man, I'd love to do that. And, to me, one of the most memorable performances of his is Doc Holliday in Tombstone. Probably the most quotable of all his performances. One of the best Westerns, in my opinion, of all time. And, just want to send some prayers out to his family and close friends. And it was really great after the pandemic was over to see him in Top Gun Maverick in the theaters, redoing his role as Iceman, this time in a more senior position. And that scene between him and Tom Cruise, to this day, you can't help but shed a tear just at that moment, especially when he asked Tom Cruise, who's the better pilot. So that was always the debate back in the day, So at the end of the day, I definitely want to rate some of my favorite performances by him. So I did a top 9. Everybody does a top 10. So I figured, because I love Brooklyn Nine-Nine, we start doing a top 9 this year. And as you know, I've taken the last couple months off, and in the episode prior to this one coming out, I explain a little bit more about what's been going on with my heart health and everything else. And for those of you that have reached out, and whether text, social media, whatever it may be, thank you and God bless you. And God bless all of you out there. If you're not feeling right and something's a little bit off, go get checked out. Apparently with Val, not saying that this would have prevented it, but he had some issues going on with his throat, and he didn't get checked out until he actually started pretty much coughing up blood. So it was a little bit, unfortunately, too late. So as 44-year-old person, if you feel like something's off, go get checked out before it's too late. You want to try to be on this planet as long as possible. And Val definitely, and especially you can see in the documentary, he lived his life to the fullest. He loved the craft of acting. He was a perfectionist. There was a lot of reports he was difficult to work with and this, that, and the other. But at the end of the day, he just wanted to do it right. And to me, there's nothing wrong with that. When someone is trying to perfect their craft and really get to know and be the character, for instance, when he played Jim Morrison in The Doors, he did nothing but listen to The Doors for, 6 to 9 months. And he actually sung the majority of that movie as himself, playing Jim Morrison. So you just have to respect someone like that just was truly devoted to the craft and has inspired so many people, especially a lot of us that, like I said, grew up in the 80s and 90s when he was really at his peak. In the 2000s and 2010s, he did a lot of straight to DVD kind of films, and occasionally here and there he would show up on some big productions. But at the end of the day, he is and always will be a force, and you will be missed, Val. So, starting at number 9 and working my way down as far as favorite performances, I got to go Danny Parker in The Salton Sea. Salton Sea to me is definitely underrated and a fantastic film. Number 8, Nick Rivers in Top Secret. This is where I first saw Val Kilmer. Top Secret is definitely a hidden gem. It's one of those where it's like Naked Gun meets an Elvis film from back in the day. It was wild all over the place. It was actually his first movie role, period. And he was the lead in it. And he was just great. And then going down to number 7, his performance as Batman and Batman Forever is definitely one of my favorites. To me, he's definitely in that top 3. Number 6, another underrated gem, in my opinion, Colonel John Henry Patterson in The Ghost in the Darkness with Michael Douglas. Fantastic film. I definitely recommend you check that out. And number 5, I think this was his second or third film, Chris Knight in the movie Real Genius. This is a great one, especially for, we're called Zero Dark Nerdy. For, all the nerds out there. It just made you feel like this is one of those movies where it's just like, I'm not that different from everybody else, and I don't have to be ridiculed for being smart. He was like the cool, smart guy, kind of like a Van Wilder, but incredibly smart. And of course, just charismatic. And that movie is definitely in my repeat list, that and the majority of the top 5 is where I watch him at least once or twice a year. So, of course, number 4, his role is Chris. I want to say Shirless, or, I'm sure I butchered that, but Chris in the movie Heat. Heat is just a masterpiece, in my opinion. It's absolutely fantastic. Of course, a lot of people think about De Niro and, of course, Robert De Niro. But, his role as Chris is absolutely fantastic. And his shooting scene where they have the big shootout at the end of the movie is so incredibly accurate that they've actually shown that to people that are training in the military and Marines and things like that. Just the way he goes around and changes clips and stuff like that. It was ridiculous, to be quite honest with you, and just a definitely memorable scene from a fantastic movie. And then going on to the top 3, his role, as I mentioned earlier, Jim Morrison in The Doors. I mean, they're almost one and the same person. It's incredibly scary how accurate that role is of him playing Jim Morrison. Then I got to go number 2, Iceman. Iceman was the classic, the coolest. Big shout outs to Flathers and, of course, my buddy Paul McCoy out there. Paul McCoy actually has a shirt where Iceman is doing this. But, Top Gun is one of those again, if you grew up in the 80s and you watched it, you wanted to be a fighter pilot and be one of these guys. And that was one of the big arguments that me and my friends would have, is who's Iceman and who's Maverick. And it was always down to those two. And 9 times out of 10, a lot of people would have rather been Iceman than Maverick. So, just classic. And of course, it was so great to see him make a cameo in Top Gun Maverick. And it's such a powerful and moving scene. And you get emotional and choked up, and we waited a long time for this film to come out. It was supposed to come out during I believe, 2019, 2020. Then the pandemic hit, and Tom Cruise was adamant that he didn't want it to go to streaming. He wanted it to be seen in theaters. And it is one of those to where hopefully if there's a re-release sometime soon, even if you've already seen it in theaters, go see it again. Top Gun Maverick is, especially for a sequel that's filmed, 30 years later from the original. It's just dynamic. And first and foremost, as I mentioned earlier, I think him as Doc Holliday in Tombstone makes that movie. Without him in the movie Tombstone, I think we go from one of the best Westerns of all time to a okay Western. I don't see anyone else playing that role. He was just tremendous. He's one of those like friends that you want to have that always will have your back, but is also definitely a wild card. So you have to keep your eye on him. So, that's definitely my top 9 Val Kilmer performances. But before wrapping up, we did, send out some posts, and we wanted to get some feedback from our fans out there on what are some of their favorite Val Kilmer movies. Christine Greason said Top Secret. Perez Parks, Kiss Kiss Bang Bang. I know that didn't make my top 9. It almost did, but he is fantastic in that. Him and Robert Downey Jr. Jason Atkins went with Willow and Heat. He said Willow as a kid, Heat as an adult. Totally get it. Matthew Bannister said Top Gun and Top Gun Maverick. Avicha, what's going on, brother? He said The Salton Sea. And another one that almost made the top 10, Ken Wilson said The Saint. Incredibly underrated film. So, on behalf of everyone from Zero Dark Nerdy, we do want to, again, send prayers and thoughts out to his family and dear friends. And Val, you will be missed, but, your legacy will go on forever. And you are truly one of the greatest. So, big thank you to our sponsors out there, the Believe Podcast Network, Golden Ticket Cinemas, DJ Scotty the Body Springer, Sailfish Comics, and that's it. I don't want to go on and on about sponsorship, especially when this is more of a tribute episode to Val. But I'm glad to be back, glad to be recording. The heart is getting back to normal, so I will be pumping out some more episodes. And at the end of the day, take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and we'll see you next time. Peace.
Thank you, Ice, for everything.
One last thing. Who's the better pilot? You or me?
This is a nice moment. Let's not ruin it.